Tyrkir. Please, feel free to leave a comment. Smash the like button. Now, we have already heard of the children of Loki and of the binding of the wolf Fenrir. However, apart from them, and Loki's other son, Narfi, who is the child of the god of trickery and his wife Sigyn, there was another of Loki's brood. And this takes us back to a time not long after the Middle Earth, Midgard, had been made by Odin and his brothers, back in the morning of time, when they slew the ancient frost giant Ymir and used his carcass to make the earth itself. Now the gods were pleased with what they'd wrought, and they lived up high in the first world of Asgard, Isialand, named after them. And it was a broad domain, and all the gods' halls and residences were located there. However, one thing that the land of Asgard did not possess was a strong defence. They needed to protect their wide kingdom. And Odin, the All-Father, the one-eyed king of the gods, called a council. All the gods and goddesses were there. And he said to them, "We need to defend ourselves, for all our prophecies have told us that far in the future, on the day of the gods' doom, known as Ragnarok, then we and all the greatest heroes of Middle-earth will fight the forces of evil, the terrible monsters, in a battle that will destroy the worlds, gods and men alike." And so they sent word out across all the worlds, asking every artisan to give a quote and a proposition as to how the work might be completed. And one by one, they heard from many a builder. But always the price was too high, or the work simply couldn't be done properly. Until one day, a mason presented himself in the land of the gods, and he offered to build them a wall to encompass the whole of Asgard. "But I'll need 3 months to do it," said the builder. "That's what I require from you, and in return, as payment, I want the sun, the moon, and the hand in marriage of Freya, the goddess, whose name means lady, who wears the flame necklace upon her bosom." And so the gods consulted with each other, and at the great council meeting, many were unhappy about the idea that if the deal turned sour, they could lose the sun and the moon from the day and night skies. But even worse, Freya, the goddess, the lady in charge of fertility and love, mistress of magic, who sends the Valkyries out to choose the bravest heroes who've been slain in battle and resurrect dead warriors. The idea that she should be given in marriage to a mere mason? It was almost too much to contemplate, but as Odin reminded them, they needed the wall. But for a while they couldn't decide. Then Loki, the god of guile, the trickster, he spoke up and he said, "Listen, this mason says he can build the wall we want, and he can do it in 3 seasons. Now I suggest that if we only allow him 2, then the work will only be half completed. He'll have broken his contract, therefore we have to pay nothing. We can't lose." So the gods went back to the builder, and they said that they'd agree, but he could only have 2 seasons to get the work done. And the mason agreed on one more condition, that he be allowed to use his horse, called Unlucky Traveller, to haul up the great loads of quarried stone he needed to build the wall. And so the gods agreed. And on the first day of winter, the builder set to work. By night, Unlucky Traveller hauled that stone up. By day, the mason dressed it, hewed it into shape, and set it in place. And so the wall began to grow, encompassing the first world of Asgard. And bit by bit, it began to circumnavigate the swamps and the marshes, where the fen halls of Frigga, queen of the gods, lay. It went around Thrudvang, the power fields where one can find the hall of Thor, around the dales and valleys full of sweet white flowers, overlooked by broad splendour, home of Balder and Nanna, and even around Gladsheim, where we find Valhall, the Hall of the Slain, presided over by Odin himself. And as the weeks went on, the work grew. The horse kept hauling up the stone. He seemed twice as strong as his master. But that builder was hard at work. And only 3 days before the first day of summer, the wall was nearly complete. And now the gods and goddesses were truly worried, because now they knew that they faced the very real danger of losing the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya. And they turned to Loki and said, "You, trickster, Laufeyar's son, you're the one who got us into this mess we're in now. You can use some of your guile and cunning to get us out of this, because if you don't, your death will be legendary. It will be sung of by poets until the end of the worlds." On hearing this, Loki's handsome features turned pale. And so, as soon as evening fell, on the last night before the job was to be finished, the giant was going down the hillside. But by now, the gods had worked out who the builder was. He was no ordinary mortal, and his horse was no ordinary one either. And they were just setting off. And then suddenly, a mare appeared. For Loki had used his magical arts to change not only his shape, but also his gender. And the mare, that was Loki, pranced up and down in front of the giant stallion, inviting him, teasing him. And the giant's horse burst free of his harness, raced after the mare into the depths of the woods. The giant ran after them, cursing in frustration, and all night they careened and caroused through the forest, with the giant trying to catch up to them. And for this reason, the very next morning, the job was not complete. There were 3 blocks of stone missing. And so the giant had broken his contract. Now he would receive no payment. And his anger was terrible to see. He swelled up, as the gods had guessed. He was a giant, all right. A mountain giant of ancient lineage. So huge, he eclipsed the sun itself. But now, Thor, the red-bearded thunder god, had returned home. He'd been away in the east, thrashing trolls. So now, it wasn't the sun and the moon and Freya that the giant received. Instead, his wages were the blows of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, as it struck him upon the head, and his skull shattered into 1,000 pieces. That was the end of him. However, the story is not quite over, because of course it took very little effort for the gods to finish the wall. But a few months afterwards, Loki, who had not been seen since the whole affair began, he returned to the land of the gods, and once more he'd resumed his normal shape. But he was leading a horse, and this was a horse that Loki had given birth to, while still wearing the likeness of the mare. And it was the best of all horses, called Sleipnir, Slipper, or Slider. He can run anywhere, even through the air itself. He can slip and slide between the worlds, even to the land of the dead. A great grey stallion with runes inscribed upon his teeth. And this horse, well, it became the favourite horse of Odin himself, the king of the gods, and the greatest of all the children of Loki. And for now, that's the end of this story. Thank you very much for listening. Please click on the notification bell. Thank you.